Hola amigos, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Emma Bennet and I write contemporary romances, and on this channel I talk about all kinds of writery things. We have day in the life vlogs and lots of live writing sessions so that we can get all those words in. Today I am joined by the lovely Eva Glyn. Hello Eva, how are you?
Hi Emma, I am good. How about you? How's Nano going?
It's a disaster. It's an absolute mess of a disaster, but it's fine. I've still got time to pull all this together. The one project has become 3 projects. It's all going to get sorted out this afternoon when I've got a 3-hour live writing session planned. So that's when it's all going to come together. Do you do either nano or camp or anything, or is that not really your kind of thing?
Not really my kind of. I've got my own little routine, and I don't like to
Sure.
really vary too far from that.
Fair enough. So Eva is published by One More Chapter Books, which is an imprint of the massive Harper Collins, if you hadn't heard of it before. So Eva, just tell us a little bit about your books for start, in case people haven't heard of you before.
Well, the unifying fact of all my books is that they are all based in Croatia. They're very much, I thought, aimed at kind of the summer reading, the holiday reading market, but people seem to love them all year round, which is very good news for me. It started in 2019. Our last holiday before lockdown was a trip to Croatia, the first time we'd been. And we had a fantastic tour guide who told us about his experiences during the war there in the 90s. And I knew there was a book in it. And eventually that book became The Olive Grove, which was my first new book, written as Eva Glyn. And it's set on the gorgeous island of Korčula. And it's basically a story of friendship between a middle-aged British woman who goes out to work there and a younger Croatian man who's, as it turns out, been deeply traumatized by the war. So that really what started me off
Right.
on the Croatian trail.
Lovely. So according to the HarperCollins website, you write escapist, relationship-driven fiction with a kernel of truth at its heart. I absolutely loved when I read that about your books. Would you say that that's an accurate depiction?
Yeah, it absolutely is. A lot of times people will use the term women's fiction for books that are about people and relationships but aren't romances. But I really loathe that term. I have male readers and I don't see why anything should be gender oriented in that way. I think
Sure.
I was looking for a term that was more inclusive of everybody. And that was the one we hit upon. As far as the kernel of truth is concerned, yeah, that's absolutely right. There's always some little tiny truth or little bit of research that I seem to find that starts things off. I mean, for example, my conversation with Darko for The Olive Grove. Then I was hunting around reading about Croatia or Yugoslavia as it was in World War II. And I found an absolutely horrifying incident which led me to write An Island of Secrets.
Right.
And then another thing I tripped over while researching The Olive Grove, another true story, led off in the direction of the collaborator's daughter. So there's always this little bit of something that really happened in there.
Sure. Lovely. Then I wanted to ask you, when did you first start writing? Is this something that you've been doing for a very long time? Because I know that you wrote under a different name before becoming Eva.
Yeah, I've scribbled all my life. Since I was a tiny child, I've scribbled poetry, short stories, bits and bobs. But I was in my 40s before I was able to write anything that was kind of novel length. And it was completely unpublishable, but it was great fun and I loved doing it. And I learned so much through the process. So really, I've been writing seriously now for about 15, 16 years. And I first found that I had something that I was willing to put forward for publication and for anyone other than my mum and my best friends to see just over 10 years ago.
Sure. Lovely. So you've had a lot of experience then.
Yes, yeah. I am so much in awe of people who write a novel and then go on and get it published. The first sort of novel-length story they've ever written. I'm
Right.
absolutely in awe of that, because it took me such a long time to get to the point where I thought, yeah, that's something finally that's kind of good enough. But I guess a lot of people go on writing courses and belong to creative writing groups, and I never had time to do any of that.
Right.
I just sort of do it as relaxation, after, a busy day job, and coming back
Mhm.
up and down to Cardiff to see my mum regularly, and all sorts of other things that were basically filling my life.
Sure. Sure. I think in my case, I did have my first book that I wrote published. But part of it is I am very precious about my words. If I've written them, they are going to have use to them and they are going to be published. I have put blood, sweat, and tears into those words, and they will not be wasted. I will have them published. So yeah, I think just an enormous amount of editing went on with my first book in particular, because I think you don't know what you're doing, do you? And unless you do study kind of story craft and things like that before you actually start doing any writing, the first story that you write, it's probably not going to work completely, is it?
No, I doubt it. I very much doubt it.
Yeah. Right, so the next question I had for you was, when were you first published? So I know you kind of hit on that a little bit in the last one.
Yeah, 10 years ago, I indie published my first book, Cheesemaker's House. A couple of years before, it had done really well in the Alan Titchmarsh Show's People's Novelist competition.
Oh,
It had
wow.
come in the top 4, but I couldn't find a publisher because it has a really ghostly element, and that really wasn't fashionable then for what was basically a contemporary romance story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, people just weren't looking for them with ghost story elements and those sorts of things in. It was a bit time slippy, a bit spooky, and that
Yeah.
wasn't fashionable then. So
And
in
of
the
course
end, I
it
thought,
is
well,
now. Isn't that
yeah,
weird?
it is
Yeah.
now. It is hugely fashionable now, and you've got writers like Kate Ryder and things like that writing, and Christina Courtney with her fantastic time travel books. It's all
Mm-hmm.
out there now, but at the time it wasn't. So my first book was self-published, and I was really lucky because it got noticed. It got a lot of people read it, a lot of bloggers reviewed it, and I didn't realize at the time how unusual that was for an indie book.
Right.
But I was very lucky, and it gave me a big boost and encouraged me to carry on writing.
Mm-hmm. And then, so that book, did that end up getting taken on by a publisher, or did you keep that indie published?
I've kept that one indie published. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote a second one to follow it called The Fairy Tree, and that was taken up by One More Chapter and ended up as my first Eva Glyn book, retitled The Missing Pieces of Us. So that
Mm-hmm.
one did go, but I have never offered The Cheesemaker's House to anyone. It's sort of my baby.
Sure.
So I'm quite happy to keep it out there indie published.
Yeah.
Um,
And also, of course, like as a kind of hybrid author myself, the sales they trickle down from the published books, and obviously, you're getting all the money, if you like, for the ones that you're bringing out
exactly.
yourself. So it makes sense.
Yeah, I think hybrid is a very good business model.
Yeah, I think it's something that really wasn't possible even kind of 10 years ago to do well, I don't think, but now things have just changed so much that I really do think that it can work very well. Yeah. So have you got any plans to bring out any more books yourself, or are you happy with One More Chapter and with what
I'm
they're
really,
doing?
really busy with my commitments to One More Chapter at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've also had a contract with Sapir Books, writing as Jane Cable.
Mm-hmm.
It's been very busy. It's been a couple of books a year. But I've just delivered the last contracted book for Sapir. So I'll have a little bit more time going forward. But I think initially that's going to be focused on what One More Chapter need. Though longer term, I think I may well put some more books out there and self-publish them.
Mm-hmm. So what's the difference between your books as Eva and your books as Jane?
The Sapir books all have a slightly ghostly elements. That's the Jane Cable ones. I've kept with that. I like it. Something a little bit ghostly, something that's not quite what it seems. It's very sort of sleight of hand in them, but it's still there. And that's the main difference. Also, I think the stories, particularly the ones I'm writing for Sapir at the moment, which are called Cornish Echoes, they're Regency, or as we say down here in Cornwall, Poldark era, dual timelines, and they kind of rattle along. They, they're adventure romances. They're really quite different.
Lovely. Right. My next question for you is, what's the hardest thing for you about writing a book?
Oh, writing the beginning for sure. I always stick in far too much backstory, and then I look at it and I think I've written 4 chapters and nothing's actually happened.
Oh no.
and it's something however much I tell myself not to do it, I still do it. I did it with the book I'm writing now. So what I do now is I send a partial manuscript off to my editor at One More Chapter, and 25,000 words, and she'll come back and look at it and tell me where I'm going wrong and what she wants me to do differently. But the overall comment is always the same, and she must be getting sick of it. You'd honestly think I'd have learned by now.
It's so funny because my favorite bit of the writing process is the beginning. I absolutely love starting a new book. It's so exciting to me. I really love getting to know the characters and, starting them off in the best possible place. It's definitely my favorite bit. Right. My next question is, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, the book that's just out, it's something I've not done before. The book that's just out, The Collaborator's Daughter, is set in Dubrovnik. And there was a minor character in that book that I really wanted to be able to continue with his story. And as the Collaborator's Daughter was set in 2010, I had a 12-year gap. I had time for him to grow up a little bit.
Right.
So I've picked up on his story. I've given him some new characters to play with. And again, it's something very different, something I've not written before, but I've always wanted to. It's one of those stories where different people come together in a cause, like Libby Page. Yes, the Lido, isn't it? It's Libby Page, isn't it? Can I just check?
Oh yes, yeah. I haven't read that one actually by her. I've read
it is,
like The Island is another one by her, and the 24-Hour Cafe.
Yeah,
I think, and I really enjoyed those. But I haven't read that one. Right.
Yeah. The Lido. They come together obviously to save the Lido in Brixton, and Josie Lloyd's Life Saving for Beginners, which is about 4 women who meet on a beach in Brighton during lockdown and go swimming together. And I wanted to do one of those stories of friendship for a while. So that's basically what next summer's Eva Glyn will be.
How lovely. What's the best thing about being an author? I always love asking this question.
Writing books that people love to read. There's absolutely nothing to beat it when someone says, "Oh, I just loved your book so much." I've got a blog tour going on for The Collaborator's Daughter at the moment, and I've just had the most lovely review comments from some of the bloggers, which has been super. But it's on a personal level too. I was on holiday a few weeks ago, and I met a lady who very kindly downloaded one of my books, and I got a lovely email from her saying, "Oh, I just spent my Sunday afternoon reading it. It was wonderful, and had a tear in my eye at the end." And you just think, oh, that's just so nice.
That's lovely.
That's the best thing for me, is having people really enjoy my books.
Yeah. So my next question was, where do you get your inspiration from? So I know that you said that you're really inspired by Croatia. But is there anything else that inspires you?
It is these little nuggets of story all the time, little nuggets of history, the little tiny bits of truth. It always used to be definitely a place for the Jane Cable books, and now for the Eva Glyn ones. It's Croatia, it's the various parts of Croatia. But there's little tiny bits of story that make me go, oh, I want to do that. I mean, the collaborator's daughter, the little inspiration for it started when I was writing The Olive Grove. And I had my character in a very, very smart beachfront villa in Dubrovnik. And I realized that looking out over the ocean, he could see an island. So I quickly Googled what the island was called, and it was called Daxa. But then, of course, when you Google something, I don't know if you do it, you kind of wander down a research rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You find a little bit more about it.
Mhm.
And I discovered it was up for sale, and it had been up for sale for a number of years, and nobody was even interested in it. And then you think, well, that's weird. And then I discovered that it had been the place where Tito's partisans had massacred so-called Nazi collaborators, and
Right.
doubtless some genuine Nazi collaborators as well, towards the
Mhm.
end of the war. And I thought, that's worth filing away.
Yeah.
And it's those little kernels of truth, things
Mhm.
like that, that made me think, right, well, that's a really good historical narrative. And I'd always wanted to write a story about a woman in her 60s that was a romance, because we get lots of stories about people perhaps up to their 40s with
Mhm.
romances. We get stories about very much older people, revisiting lost romance, or character stories
Mhm.
about them. But it seemed to me there was a bit of a gap.
Sure.
So I thought, right, well, let's write a romance, the woman in her 60s. And so the two ideas came together because the timing happened to work for when they excavated the graves in Daxa and started looking for relatives through DNA was 65 years after the men were killed. So
Oh,
things all started to come together.
yeah.
And it's things like that inspire me most, when two ideas collide and there's a really good fit.
Mhm. Okay, and my final question for you today is, what's been the best moment in your writing career so far?
Well, with the Alan Titchmarsh show right at the very beginning, I did think, when I was sitting on a huge polystyrene book in a television studio, it probably won't get much better than this. But actually, it did. And it kind of all stemmed from that, because that competition was sponsored by Harper Collins. So I
Right.
always kind of wanted to be a Harper Collins author.
Mhm.
So when I was signed for One More Chapter, that was just amazing.
Mhm.
That was the best moment. And also because I've been working with Charlotte Ledger, who I've always wanted to be working with.
She's
I've met her.
amazing.
I know, and
Mhm.
she's such a supporter of romantic fiction.
Mhm.
And I'd met her years before at Winchester Writers' Conference, and since that date, I've always wanted to work with her.
Mhm.
So it was just a win-win all way round. So that was definitely the best moment.
Was it an email that you got from One More Chapter, or was it the famous phone call?
It was the email, but it wasn't entirely clear she was offering me a contract.
Right.
It was sort of, well, how would you feel about this sort of cover and this sort of author brand? And I thought, well, that all sounds very promising. So I went
Mhm.
back and I said, can you just be clear? Oh, you actually offered me a contract? She came back, oh, God, yes. Because
Imagine, but
it
imagine
was all
if she'd
during
come back
lockdown.
and yeah, but imagine if she'd come back and just been like, "Oh no,
Well, it happens. I mean, I've had so many rejections over the time. It would have been gutting, because it was really what I wanted.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was probably the best moment.
Yeah, and definitely like made any rejections completely worthwhile to be not only working with the publisher that you wanted, but also the editor that you wanted as well."
Yeah. Oh, but absolutely. Yeah, it really did make a difference. I mean, I was really, I was really happy with the Jane Cable books, with Sapir Books. But at the end of the day, they're a small independent publisher. So the books only ever go on Amazon.
Sure.
And that's the main thing for me. Yes, it's Amazon paperback and it's an Amazon Kindle book, but the distribution was always going to be very narrow for them. And I mean, Amy Durant, the MD and my editor there, is super, and she's great to work with. But they're small; they can't fulfil the ambition I've got for my writing on their own.
Sure. Because one more chapter. Is that ebook kind of? It's not ebook only, but like ebook first. Is that how you'd say it? And then they bring out the paperback. Yeah.
Yeah, it is digital first, but there's very often not a huge gap. For example, the ebook of The Collaborator's Door came out on the 1st of April, and the paperback's coming out on the 23rd of May. It was actually even going to be sooner than that, but we decided to tweak the cover after a little while, so that delayed the paperback. But generally, they come out within about 5 or 6 weeks. There's not too long a gap.
And your covers are absolutely beautiful. I think especially like when I was looking at them the other day in preparation for this, seeing them kind of all together, if you like, when I was looking up the images, they just look absolutely gorgeous together.
They do. I'm so lucky. And I've had a little boost with one of them this morning as well, because my local author friend Liz Fennick is at the London book fair at the moment, and she sent me a photo of them, of the cover on the Harper Collins stand, with some other really lovely covers. So yeah, but their covers are fantastic for all the authors. They just know what it takes.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come and be interviewed today. It's just so interesting, I think, for people to hear about your journey, and also because you've ended up with such an amazing publisher, such beautiful books, and Harper Collins is obviously something that a lot of writers aspire to even, have an email acknowledging their presence, if you like, let alone being offered a contract. So absolutely brilliant. And, I really loved hearing about what inspired you in particular, and the little bits that you pick up and put together using the history of the places that you love so much. So yeah, absolutely brilliant.
No, thank you for inviting me. And what I would say to anybody is never give up. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but you've got to finish the book. You've got to polish the book. You've got to get it right. And then you've just got to get used to the idea of rejections, and that you will find the right person, because you will. If you keep going, you will find the right person who loves your book as much as you do and is happy to put it out there.
Yeah.
Keep writing, everybody.
Yeah, keep writing. But also what I like to say as well is, when you're sitting there with your first book that you're sending out, and you're polishing it and you're polishing it and you're polishing it, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, this has taken me, 2 years, and I've only just got it right. How on earth am I going to be able to produce, books faster than that if I do get a publishing contract out of it? I always say, bear in mind that it's only the first one that you need to absolutely polish so that it's perfect, because after that point, if you've got an editor, there's so much more collaboration, and it goes back and forth, and you've got copy editors helping you out as well, and proofreaders and things like that. So bear in mind, when you're in the middle of trying to get every single word right for that first one, it's not always going to be like that.
No, it absolutely isn't. When you've got a team behind you, everything's easier. And the other thing is if you can scrape time in a busy life to write 1,000 words a day, that's 100 days, and you can write a book.
Yeah, absolutely. It's breaking it down, isn't it, into achievable chunks, especially if, you're not lucky enough to have a lot of time for writing, which so many people aren't. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you everyone for watching this. I do hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have. If you're interested in reading at least one of Eva's books, which you definitely should, the links will be down in the description below for you to go and check them out. So I will say goodbye for now, and I will catch you in the next one. And make sure that you like if you've enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't already for lots more fun on this channel. See you soon, and bye bye, Eva.
Bye.